So, our first review of the day is going to be for Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom. As I said before, this is the last film in the DCEU, what they started 10 years ago. Remember that when they had that picture where it was Ben Affleck and Henry Cavill and Gal Gadot and Jason Momoa, and it was like, hey, this is an Ezra Miller. I was like, this is the start of the DCEU with all these DC films. And as far as it's been 10 years since that happened. And as far as the legacy that it's left behind, I mean, I guess that's up to matter of opinion of what you kind of think about it. Failure, success. I think it's been, I guess, mostly a failure. I get a lot of stuff they've done. I think the one great movie that they had was probably Wonder Woman. I thought was really great. I thought Wonder
Hmm.
Woman was really great. And I thought do you count the Suicide Squad, the James Gunn one, as part of the DCEU?
Yes, technically I do.
Okay, so
It's
that
at the tail end of it, but yes.
Okay. So this one with Aquaman and Lost Kingdom, this marks the last of that era. James Wan again has returned, who directed the first Aquaman. And the first Aquaman was, I don't know if it was a surprise to anyone else, but it was a surprise to me, was a massive success, $1 billion movie for Warner Brothers here. Which kind of crazy when people always made all those jokes about Aquaman and talking to fish and all that other stuff that he was kind of a running joke for a long time. So it's kind of surprising there that it became like $1 billion movie, at least for me.
Hmm.
But here, it's Return, where you see kind of now Jason Momoa, Aquaman, Arthur Curry, that he is now the king of Atlantis, taking on that responsibility. And you realize it's like, hey, it's kind of boring. You know what I mean? I miss back in the day when I used to just party, have fun. Now I got all this responsibility and shit, and all these meetings, and it's all boring. I just want to kind of punch stuff and, swim around. I don't want to do all this leadership shit. It's kind of boring. And then you see that some more kind of further updates in his life is that he's married, he's got a kid with Amber Heard's character Mira, and so he's got a little baby there, Arthur Curry Jr. And the big conflict of this movie is you have Yahya Abdul-Mateen, who's returning as Black Manta, and he wants to, of course, get revenge on Aquaman because in the previous film he killed his father. And the way he's going to go about getting revenge on Aquaman is using the Black Trident, which causes death and destruction. It was the long lost trident of a forgotten Atlantis kingdom at one point, hence the name, the Lost Kingdom, hence that name there. So yeah, so he's gonna use that Black Trident to basically get revenge on Arthur Curry, Aquaman. Um, so I'm gonna pass it to Dusk, get some of his
Hmm.
thoughts on this, and we're gonna discuss the movie. So, Dusk, what are your thoughts on Aquaman, the Lost Kingdom?
Uh, as the last official movie of DCEU, uh, I feel really bad for it because it does not end on a good note. It ends more on a kind of a whimper. It This movie, you can feel the re-edits in this movie. This movie is notorious for having to be re-edited, reshot, both for the famous test screenings not going well for it, having to re-edit, add new scenes, in addition to the controversy with Amber Heard and her whole situation we're not going to get into, that her scenes were greatly reduced. There are many points in this movie where you can tell that Mira as a character, she's still there. They do it the best they can in the marketing to not show her off, but she is there, but she isn't even, she's like there in the first maybe 10 minutes of the movie, and then she shows up again in the last 10 minutes of the movie. And you can tell a lot of her lines or a lot of what parts she might have played in the movie were severely cut down.
Mm,
Uh, Not even with that withstanding, this movie feels like a jumbled tonal mess. On the one hand, you have this uh, dark army that is where Black Manus wants to get revenge on Arthur Curry for taking his family, aka his father, away from him, and he wants to get revenge on him. And then on the other side, you have the buddy cop adventure movie with Aquaman and his half brother or Marius, aka Ocean Master. And between these, you have those two movies vying for each other, fighting against each other, and I don't know about this movie. This movie felt so choppy, so unable to let scenes play. there are moments of attempted comedy, but they never let those scenes play. They merely cut and jump to another scene, or cut, go to another scene. And sometimes characters feel like they're about to say something else, or want to say something else, and then it gets cut. What I will say though is Patrick Wilson as Orn is probably one of the more likable characteristics of this movie. I just like his performance as this very poised, very focused leader of a people, and having to work with Jason Momoa as Arthur Curry. It does lead to some funny moments here and there, and working off each other to figure out how to solve an issue. But I think this also comes down to Jason Momoa himself. I don't know if he was ad-libbing a lot more in this movie than he was before, but there are a lot of moments where he felt more like he was just playing himself and not the Aquaman character. Where he's like, I just want to go biking and grab a brewski and kick back and pull off my Ric Flair
Mhm.
and go, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Jason Momoa, I mean, I feel like Jason Momoa on a lot of stuff is just gonna be Jason Momoa. You know, when Jason Momoa is in Dune, he's Jason
Mhm.
Momoa. When Jason
Yeah.
Momoa is in Fast and Furious, I mean, he's basically Jason Momoa. I mean, he's evil Jason Momoa, but it's still Jason Momoa. You know, like his range is not that, big here.
No.
You know, it's not that huge here. So you're gonna
He's like The
get what you
Rock.
yeah, I don't know, I think even The Rock has a little bit more. I mean, Rock has shown he's kinda got, like, stuff in, like, Pain and Gain or, like, Faster or something like that. He's shown that he's kinda got a little bit of depth as far as his acting goes a little bit, at least stretch.
Mhm.
Hey, thank you, Angie in Place. Thank you for the
Thank you.
raid, man. Thank you. Very much appreciate that. Um, but yeah, you see so I think a large part of, Jason Momoa who when I saw the Aquaman movie, the first one,
Mhm.
I liked him. I thought that, his personality carried a lot of it. You know, he was aqua bro, a lot of his things of, his whole yeehaw and woo and yeah and him swimming and doing this stuff. It was like, okay, I could kind of get behind that. I don't think his personality this time around saves it, just it can't make up for a lot of other failures in this movie.
Yeah.
And I wasn't even big on the first Aquaman movie. I thought that was kind of also kind of very weak. I
Mhm.
think this one, the sequel to it, is even weaker than the first one was.
Yeah.
And I think a large part of that is because you have this interesting world. When you see Atlantis and you see a lot of great stuff here, it's like a lot of stuff looks kind of cool, and maybe you can do a lot of stuff with the interesting creatures and this world and everything. And I think they fail at that. Then you also said the tonally, this movie is kind of also a lot over the place. Like you said, the buddy cop, which I think that's the best element of the movie
Yeah.
when it's Patrick Wilson and Jason Momoa. I think that is the best element of it. But then all this other stuff of trying to have a more darker villain and Yahya Abdul-Mateen, who's the black man who says like, "I want to take everything from you," and he's really hitting him where it hurts. Where he's going after his family. But it's just you don't really feel, I don't think, too much that because it's so like I don't feel like there's any real big stakes here. I don't feel like there's
Mhm.
anything really because again, this is the last movie of, this whole DCU, and it's like I think they were kinda stuck of, like, they didn't know where to end it off or, like, "Do we end this with a bang or not?" Yeah, I mean, what's some of your thoughts there?
Yeah, it's just like you said, they didn't know exactly kind of where they wanted to be. And I don't know if you noticed this, but every time somebody's about to be like stabbed or killed, you're like, I'm just about to do it, and then bam, they get hit by something and get knocked out of the way. I'm just about to get you, and bam, I get saved. It happened doing it 2 times, maybe 3 times, it's okay. But this happened like 7 or 8 times. And just
Uh
mm,
Well, that's I don't know, that I know what you're talking about, but that's just like a common movie thing where characters like when characters have guns or like it's a troop of dudes, an army of dudes, and then they'll have like they're trying to train their guns on one person. It's like, okay, get ready, aim, fire. Like they have to do a whole preparation before somebody can come
I
in
know,
and
but
then
it was just
save
really
'em.
egregious this time around. It was just one of the things I noticed. The comedy also felt very hit or miss this time around. Uh, I think ultimately the script really let down the story. It's all over the place. It says one thing but does another. One of the main plots of this is he wants to get revenge on Aquaman, and that would work in a more serious story, but you never really get to feel it. You never really let it get to sink down because, well, we got to have a bunch of other action scenes. We got to have a buddy cop moment here and there. We got to have a lot. So a lot of moments are stuck between not letting it take too much time before we get back to that. And so you never really feel like Black Mantis is a real threat. And the villain, quote unquote, his plan is completely stupid. They set up a whole situation on what they got to do to uh, basically free this dark army,
Mhm.
and then they have an explanation later. It's like, oh, well, I guess they don't even need to do that because all they really need to do is just blast their way in and use some blood. They didn't talk about that until much later in the movie.
Mm. A lot of it does feel kinda slopped and kinda put together, and things were heavily probably taken out and put back in, and
Yeah, yeah.
uh, everything like that. And watching it, especially with all these kind of this world and these effects, a lot of it reminded me a lot of the Star Wars prequels, especially
Mm,
when they go to like certain things. They go to like basically they go to a version of Canto Bight, basically.
yeah.
They go to that, or like some casino, like seedy kind of place where there's like a singer and everything like that.
Oh,
It's like,
don't, yeah, especially that one.
I was like, what the hell is this? I mean, I guess I kind of appreciate for expanding out and trying to, explore more of this world, but
Sure, but it makes no sense.
it kinda comes off as, like, really super goofy and
Hmm.
kinda lame, which I guess, I mean, it kinda plays with a little bit, it's not trying to again, that's where the tone kinda comes in, the clash of, like, having this such a serious villain
Hmm.
like Black Manta, but then having a lot of these kinda goofier stuff kinda go on there. That's where kinda maybe the tonally kinda really clashes and just doesn't mesh well there. Not to say you can't have
Right.
jokes and humor and then a lot of stuff in a somewhat of a serious movie, but it just has to be
Hmm.
it's just not blended well, I don't think, in this.
No.
There. What'd you
Did
think
you?
about
Mhm.
Oh, go ahead.
Did you notice at the end of that there's a scene where they have that whole situation and there's a cake stuff coming down? Like, it's just literally falling on people, and then it cuts to a moment where somebody is singing, like a singer is singing,
Yeah.
and then they cut away again. I'm like, "Well, the whole roof's caving down. Why are you still singing?"
She's committed, man. She's got a
I
job.
just like I just didn't understand. I'm like, that was clearly an out of order cut, but they didn't have a way to re-put that back in, so they just had to use what they had. Yeah, this movie was definitely this movie was very Swiss cheese. It was very cut and put together, stitched and re-stitched together. But what were you gonna say?
Well, I was gonna ask you, so what is your opinion, and we talked about Jason Momoa, we talked
Mhm,
about Patrick Wilson, who I think they do really well together, and they somewhat
mhm.
kinda are some of the best parts of it. What do you think about some of the side characters? Like, what did you think about Amber Heard as Mira? What do you think about Nicole Kidman? You have also some kinda newer additions here, like Randall Park, who's working with, the Black Manta character to help
Yes,
get the
Dr. Steven Shin.
Yeah. So what do you think about some of the kinda other characters that you see here?
Well, look, Amber Heard doesn't have a lot of lines in this, so she doesn't really get much to do. Like I said, she shows up at the very beginning of the movie and she shows up at the very end. And even the moment where she does help and save the day, it's very short lived and very quick. It was very clear that she had a much bigger part to play in this movie, but her role was severely reduced. So there's not much really to say for her acting. She's not really given a lot of time to really show herself off. Uh, Although the scenes that she is in, she seemed pretty disinterested about the whole thing. Uh, um, Dolph Lundgren playing Nearest is like the king, uh, Mira's father. He is this ridiculous accent. It's still staying. I don't know who told him he could play that ridiculous accent,
Oh, I
but
thought he was using his regular accent, I thought.
oh man, he was going even harder on it. So-
Okay.
But I mean, I mean, it's nice to see Tamora Morrison. I'm glad he's still doing work, but he doesn't really have a lot to do in this movie as well. As for as the guy who plays Stephen Shin Randall Park, he's fine. He has a he's like one of the most interesting side characters where they try to give him some more depth where he's a bad guy, but he doesn't really want to be a bad guy. He was a scientist and he just wanted to discover and to be taken seriously. And so he worked with Black Manta, but he doesn't want to actually hurt anybody. So he's just kind of roped in along for the ride. And I think Red Apart plays that well enough, but the comedy they give him to do just isn't up to snuff. He and Red Apart can be funny. I've seen him be pretty funny, or at least have a very good dry humor on occasion. But this, I think they just let him just kind of ad lib, and he didn't really have much to work with, and so he just comes off as just okay. And yeah, I don't know. Well, what did you think?
So Randall Park, who people have seen, he's been even in the MCU, so he's getting the MCU checks, and he's getting the DC
Hmm.
checks here. Um, and
And good for
I
him.
yeah, good for him, and I like seeing him and stuff. I think he's really good. I think he's
Yeah,
got he's a good comedian, he's a funny guy, and so I like seeing him in different stuff. Um, and I don't say he's a bad guy per se. I think he's just somebody because they try to position him as like he's a scientist who wants to discover
yeah. He's just in a
Atlantis.
bad situation.
And he's like, "Okay, I'm just gonna hook up with this dude just so I can see Atlantis and to know it's real and everything." And that's also kind of another conflict in this movie too, is Atlantis and whether or not because they bring in kind of climate change and they kind of bring in that element in the movie too. Because a lot of the surface world, what they're doing is ruining the Atlantis and water and everything like that. Um, so he's kind of I think he's okay. I think he's fine. Dolph Lundgren, who's King, you mentioned him. I mean, he's, I guess, okay for what this is. I mean, a lot of people just, okay, you're just okay for the material you're given and what you're in, and
Yeah.
that's fine. I'm not expecting probably a whole lot here from this material. Action wise, and you bring it with, like, well, what about, maybe some of the action here? You have the effects. It's a lot of action. It's a lot of action
Oh yeah.
scenes in here. You're going to get a lot of that. And I do appreciate that most of it is in Atlantis. Like most of
Mm,
this movie is all in Atlantis, which I do appreciate that it's not the thing where it's kind of like trying to do a lot of back and forth, like so you do see like most of the movie all takes place in Atlantis, and you see the city and you see all these different things. um
yeah.
so
The
yeah,
mhm.
I did kind of like that aspect of them, what they did, and like I said, a lot of the different technology stuff that they show again that you really could have played, which I wish they got into
Yeah.
more of. And I think either maybe you should have done one thing. It just seems like a lot of ideas in the pot, and maybe you should have gone with one or two instead of four
But
or
that was
five.
even the first movie too. There were a lot of ideas in the first movie too they didn't really let settle.
Mm,
But
yeah.
I'll agree wholeheartedly. I think what I really like about James Wan, especially with the Aquaman movies, is they just embrace the comics. They embrace the comic idea. Look, he's king of Atlantis, of the seven seas, and they've all got weird stuff in them. We're not going to pretend otherwise. In the first 3 minutes, he rides a glowing seahorse called Storm into
Yeah.
battle. And not gonna lie, that seahorse saves his life later. So it's kind of badass. But yeah, it's crazy. Aquaman does a lot of crazy stuff. They've done a bunch of different versions of Aquaman throughout the years. The most traditional version of him with the blonde hair and his orange and green outfit. In the '90s, they tried to have him have long hair and a hook arm and be more of like a angry pirate, try and make him more badass. And now we
Yeah.
have the Jason Momoa version, and kind of like a weird in between the two, which is fine. I always felt he was more of like an Errol Flynn kind of a character, but I mean, I totally understand the direction they went with it. Visually, the movies are you know what I appreciate about the first movie is there was a lot more physical effects in the first one. A lot more on set. There was a lot of CGI, sure, but it was really waited until later on. This one does have its share of moments, and I do appreciate that, especially with a CGI fest in a Marvel movie. I appreciate that there's just some physical moments happening. And yeah, I think the movie is very colorful. It's very interesting visually, but I do think it gets a little too aggressive on the CGI, just like the first one where it just becomes a little too much.
Yeah. At least in the first one, I'm showing the trailer for the first one. At least what I also hate about the first one was at the end where it was just like CGI
Oh yeah,
bukkake.
overload.
It was just like boom, boom, all this. I was like, what the fuck is happening? So there's
Mm,
not that in the sequel, so there isn't that there. And
no.
I still don't think Jason Momoa and Amber Heard really have that much
Oh,
chemistry
no, no.
together. Uh,
They could have replaced Amber Heard with Emily Clark. At least they or any other or actress at this point. They could have easily replaced it, and the audience would have been like, "Yeah, okay,
yeah. And some stuff they do with Mira is kind of cool, like because she
yeah."
has those powers where she can like
Power of
manipulate water,
water.
which I wish they got into more of because I
Mira in
like
the
the
comics is a badass. Mira in the comics, along with Arthur, are actually badass in the comics. Even Ocean Master is pretty badass too. So seeing her actually using her ocean power is interesting. They just hardly use it.
Yeah. So I wish they did showed more of that because I liked her using her ocean powers and using that stuff like that. Like kind of like it's like basically water bending, basically
Mhm.
what they do like in Avatar. So that was kind of cool to see that. But yeah, with this one, I with the sequel, I mean, this kind of it just gave me a lot of superhero fatigue. I mean, I just was kind of like, okay, here we go. With a lot of elements here, and there was just nothing that exciting about this movie, really. And I don't think Jason Momoa or Patrick Wilson is, good as I like them together, as good as they are together, I don't think they're enough to really
Yeah.
make this movie worth that much
In
watching.
a more coherent story, this could have been a fun enemy of my enemy is my friend setup and working their differences out and really focusing on that. I do admit though, the Dark Army, I do appreciate that it's not just CGI with them. When they get to the skeleton guys, it's also practical effects with those guys too, interlaced with CGI. That
Yeah,
that was kind of nice, even if it was a bit goofy.
yeah, and it leans into Juan with his horror kinda aspects there.
Right. And I'm always
Uh,
happy to see that.
yeah, and, Yahya Abdul-Mateen, I think he's a fabulous actor, and I think, I love the Black Manta costume and its
Mhm.
comic accurate costume and everything, and so you mentioned, I appreciate the comic accurate even with Aquaman, he's got the orange, suit with the green pants, the top, so that's very good, so but yeah, I mean, I don't think you ain't missing much by not seeing this, really, I don't think. I mean, I guess if you were a big fan of the first one, will you enjoy this one too? I
Eh,
guess, maybe. I wasn't a big fan of the first one,
yeah.
so I didn't have that much expectation going in here. Some people might get some enjoyment, I might have fun with it, but me
Mhm.
personally, I didn't. So I would just give it, I give it a skip it for me, or maybe a low stream it, or just a skip it. Probably would be my
Mhm.
character. What about you?
Yeah, I'm right next. I'm right with you. This is a skip it. I Even if you enjoyed the first Aquaman movie, there were things and parts of it, even as ridiculous as it were, that were worked enough. The relationship with Aquaman and his dad, Timur Morrison, the adventure, even though the relationship between him and Amber Heard, there was no chemistry. At least they visited different vistas, and they were it's like on sets, and there was a lot of good movement, but at least a goal in mind. This, even though there's a central goal here, it just doesn't feel like they're reaching it. And at the same point, it does feel like a bunch of little stories, or at least two movies, just kind of slammed into each other and stitched together because it's the last Aquaman movie, and a lot of too many ideas going on at once. But yeah, I just think even with all that said and done, even if you were a fan, I just don't think you're gonna get too much out of this aside from seeing your characters one more time, and that's a shame. That really is a shame. What a way to end 10 years, a decade, especially with people who were telling my ear off after Man of Steel of, "Nah, man, you just don't get it. It's gonna turn out to be great."
Yeah.
And I'm like, I hope you guys are right. I really do. And I think also the sad part is when James Gunn came out and said, "Hey, so we're just starting it over." He said that with Aquaman 2 still in production, uh, Flash finishing production, who had notoriously been in and out of production for a while, and I forget the other one. Like at least 2 or 3 movies on the way,
Blue
3 or
Beetle?
3 big movies. Basically told the audience, "Don't care about these." You know?
Yeah, and I don't think it's tracking too well. I think the opening
I
is
think it's gonna be I think it's gonna be a bomb, like a big bomb.
I think it's tracking even lower than the Marvels right
Oh
now.
god, wow. And the
Um,
Marvels was the Marvels' biggest bomb to date.
yeah. So this is an article. Let me share it kind of with you here and share with the audience. And thank you, by the way, thank you, Chill, for the raid there for the
Yeah, thank you.
review. Thank you so much. It says Aquaman is slowly swimming his way back to theaters, but he may get washed up at the box office. I don't need all that fucking puns there. The latest DC Universe movie, Aquaman and Lost Kingdom, has made 4.5 million in Thursday previews at the
Oh.
domestic box office. The superhero sequel, which marks the final installment of the DCU before it gets rebooted by the DC Studios chiefs James Gunn and Peter Safran, is shaping to be the latest
Oh, yeah,
misfired take
Shazam!
after The Flash, Blue
And
Beetle,
Blue
and
Beetle.
Shazam disappointing during their box office run. Aquaman and Lost Kingdom expect to make between 35 million to 40 million in the 4-day holiday weekend, which includes Christmas Day on Monday. It's lower than the 67 million start in the original Aquaman, had 5 years ago in 2018, but the movie surfed to an outstanding 335 million in North America and 1.15 billion globally. I don't think it's gonna make a
Oh, it
billion,
ain't even gonna get close to that.
but it's tough. So I think, yeah, and I was kinda thinking maybe it might do well because it's, again, the same slot,
Mhm.
Christmas, nothing else is competing against it. Maybe it could, get that again, but I think it'll be tough. Maybe, I don't know. I don't know, maybe China, I don't know, maybe they can help save
I
it.
I I think China's tired of superheroes.
Yeah, I don't know.
They're tired of saving superhero genre.
Yeah, but, so, I don't know, we'll see. But, yeah, so 2 Skippets for Aquaman 2, and The Lost Kingdom. Yeah, thank you, thanks, Jill, man. How was your stream? Was it pretty good?
It's
And
chill.
how's going to Engine Plays? How was your stream? Hope it was good, man. Are you guys gonna go see Aquaman 2, The Lost Kingdom?